Hello to all the gentlemen and ladies listening to Everyday Love Stories, a channel where we share simple yet touching love stories in the later years of life. Today I invite you to listen to a story that is both gentle and profound, told through the memories of an elderly man. It begins with just a cup of tea every morning and ends with a silence that makes the heart ache. Could this be a true love story? Join me and let's find out. You ever fall in love without saying a word? I guess some would say it's impossible, that love has to be loud, spoken, acted upon. But if you've lived as long as I have, you start to realize that love can take on many forms. Sometimes it's quieter, sometimes it's just a glance, a moment shared without needing to say anything at all. My name is Thomas Wright. I'm 72 years old, and most mornings you'll find me at the same little cafe, sitting by the window just watching the world go by. I've been doing this for years now. It's become part of my routine, a small part of my life that still feels important. Not that I have much else to hold on to these days. You see, I lost my wife, Mary, a few years ago. After she passed, the days started to blur together. The house was quieter, emptier. And as the years went on, I found myself spending more and more time alone, retreating into the small comforts of daily life. The cafe was one of those comforts. Didn't mind the solitude at first. It gave me time to think, to reflect. But after a while it began to feel different. Loneliness isn't something you can run away from, no matter how many cups of coffee you drink or how many books you read. It follows you. That's when I started going to the cafe. It was simple at first, a quiet place to pass the time. But something about it changed, something I didn't expect. I'd get up every morning, put on my jacket, grab my hat, and head down to Margie's cafe. The smell of fresh coffee always filled the air. And there was a warmth in that little place that made the world feel a little less cold. I didn't speak much, just ordered my usual cup of coffee and sat by the window. People came and went, and I'd watch them trying to imagine their lives, their stories. But there was one person who changed everything. Every morning, she'd sit at the same table near the corner by the window, just like me. I'd glance over, not in any particular way, just out of habit, I suppose. She'd sip her tea slowly, staring out the window, her eyes lost in thought. I didn't know her name. I didn't know anything about her. But I began to notice her. At first it was just an ordinary morning, like any other. I didn't think much of it. But after a few days, I realized that she was always there, just like I was. I started looking forward to seeing her, though I'd never said a word to her. There was a comfort in her presence, like she belonged there. Just as I did. I wasn't sure what it was, but it felt like something familiar, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I wonder, have you ever felt that way? Like you're just waiting for something to change, but you don't know what it is? It's funny, isn't it? How you don't realize how quiet your life has become until something breaks the silence. For years now, my life has been a steady rhythm, ticking along like an old clock that you forget is even running until it stops. Retiring at 65 seemed like a relief at first, a long-awaited break from work and all the stress that came with it. But I didn't expect the silence that came with it. I used to be a part of something, even if it was just a small part. At work, I was needed. I had colleagues to talk to, meetings to attend, reports to write. It was enough to fill the day, to make me feel like I was still moving forward, even if it was just in small steps. But then, one day, that all stopped. And suddenly I found myself at home, sitting in the same chair, staring at the same four walls. Retirement wasn't what I imagined. It wasn't about relaxing or enjoying the golden years like people talked about. No one warned me about the quiet, the way everything just sort of fades. My friends, the ones I used to share lunches and jokes with, started to drift away. Some of them passed on, others moved away, and a few just seemed to disappear from my life entirely. It's funny how quickly people fade when they're not part of your daily routine anymore. I didn't blame them. I knew they had their own lives, their own things to keep them busy. But still it left a hole. I never minded being on my own. At least, I thought I didn't. For years it was just Mary and me, and that was enough. But after she was gone, I realized how much I had taken her presence for granted. We'd been together for nearly 40 years, and in all those years, we never once stopped being there for each other. She had a way of filling the silence, making the small moments feel important. Every morning, she would wake up before me, the smell of coffee filling the house as she made it just the way I liked. She used to joke that she made the best coffee in the world, and I'd laugh, agreeing with her just to make her smile. It wasn't about the coffee, of course. It was about her, the way she moved through the house in the early morning light, humming a little tune, always making sure everything was just right. Now it's just me. I still make coffee every morning, but it's not the same. I don't enjoy it. It's just something I do to pass the time. The house feels empty, too quiet. I walk around the rooms, almost expecting her to be there, sitting on the couch, waiting for me to join her. But there's nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, and the sound of my own footsteps. Our children, well, they've got their own lives now. They're busy with their jobs, their families. They call every so often, usually on holidays or birthdays. Sometimes they send a text just to check in. I don't hold it against them. I understand. They're living their lives, just like we did when we were their age. But it doesn't stop the loneliness from creeping in. I'll admit I miss the sound of their voices, the laughter when the grandkids are over. I miss feeling like I was part of something bigger than just myself. I find myself sitting in the same chair, day after day, staring out the window, waiting for something to change. But it never does. The days blend together. It's easy to let time slip by when there's nothing to anchor you, nothing to look forward to. I wake up, have my coffee, read the newspaper, maybe take a walk if the weather's nice. But it all feels like I'm just passing through the days, not really living them. And that's when I started going to the café. It was a small thing, just a way to break up the monotony. I didn't expect anything to change. I didn't think I needed anything. But you know, sometimes life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't even realize how much I needed that small bit of connection, that simple routine, until it became something more. I was used to being alone, but I don't think I really knew what loneliness was until I had to face it head on. It's funny how that happens, isn't it? You don't miss something until it's gone. I never realized how much I missed her, how much I missed the little things until I was left to face the silence by myself. But then, there she was, a presence in the quiet. And in a way, that small bit of comfort, the simple act of seeing her there every morning, became something I looked forward to. It wasn't anything extraordinary, not like how they show in the movies, no dramatic glance across a crowded room, No sudden rush of emotions or heartbeats racing. It was much quieter than that, much subtler. She first caught my eye on a Tuesday morning, just like any other. I remember it clearly. The rain was coming down outside, soft and steady, as though the world was wrapped in a gentle fog. I had just entered Margie's café, as I did every morning, the warm aroma of coffee greeting me as I stepped in. The usual hum of conversations and the clinking of mugs filled the air. I went to my usual spot by the window, just like I had done for years now. It was comforting, almost automatic. But on this particular day, something was different. Maybe it was the weather, or maybe it was the quiet in the cafe that morning, but I couldn't shake the feeling that today was going to be unlike the others. And then I saw her. She was sitting by the window, just like me. Same spot, same time, same quiet demeanor. She had her back to me, but even from behind, there was something about her that drew me in. I noticed the way she held her cup, carefully, as though savoring every moment. She wasn't in a rush, not like the other patrons who seemed to hurry through their mornings. No, she was content. Her presence, calm and steady, filled the space in a way I couldn't explain. Her hair was grey, not the kind of grey that looked tired, but the kind that spoke of wisdom, of years lived fully. She wore a soft navy blue sweater that looked well worn, as if it had been a favourite for many years. There was a quiet elegance about her, the kind that didn't demand attention, but commanded it all the same. I had no idea who she was. I didn't know her name, didn't know anything about her. But for some reason, I couldn't stop looking at her. It wasn't anything in particular, not a smile, not a gesture, not even a glance our way. It was simply the way she existed, in that space, the way she seemed to belong in that moment. I realized, as I watched her, that I had never noticed her before. She'd always been there, just as I had, but for some reason, on this rainy morning, she stood out. It wasn't love, not exactly. It wasn't even curiosity. It was something gentler, something quieter, a sense of familiarity, of comfort. It was like seeing someone you've known your whole life, even though you've never actually met them. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I also couldn't stop thinking about it. The strange thing was, I didn't feel the need to approach her, to say anything at all. Her presence was enough. It felt like we were two people who didn't need to fill the silence with words, but rather shared it in a way that made everything feel just a little bit more meaningful. As the minutes passed, I sipped my coffee, stealing glances at her every now and then. It wasn't intrusive. It wasn't in a way that would have made her uncomfortable. It was more like we were both caught in the same rhythm of the morning, two solitary souls who happened to cross paths. The whole cafe seemed to fade into the background, leaving just the two of us, each lost in our own quiet worlds. She never looked my way that morning. She didn't need to, and honestly I didn't want her to. There was something comforting in the idea that we could both be there, silently sharing the same space without the need for anything more. Her presence, simply her being there, made that morning feel different. It felt peaceful, like the world outside had slowed down just for a moment, just for us. I didn't even notice how much time had passed until the rain stopped. She stood up, slowly, carefully, as though savouring the last few moments in the cafe. She glanced at me then, just for a brief second, as if acknowledging that we had shared something unspoken. Then, without a word, she left. I sat there for a while, staring at the empty seat by the window, feeling something stir inside me. It wasn't love, not yet anyway, but there was something there. Something real, something that I hadn't felt in a long time. And from that day on, I started coming to the café a little earlier, hoping to see her again. Maybe it was the rain that made her feel familiar, or maybe it was just the way she made the space feel a little less empty. Whatever it was, I knew one thing: something had shifted, something had begun, and for the first time in a long while, I found myself looking forward to the next morning. The days went by, each one slipping quietly into the next, but there was a rhythm now, a familiar pattern. Every morning, at almost the same time, I would walk into Margie's cafe, the door chiming softly as I entered. And every morning, there she was, sitting in her usual spot by the window, a cup of tea in front of her, the same serene expression on her face. We didn't speak much. There was no need to. It wasn't about words anymore, but something unspoken that passed between us, a quiet connection that grew stronger with every shared moment. I'd walk in, and she'd look up from her book or her tea, and I'd give her a small nod. She'd nod back, a slight smile curving her lips, and just like that, everything felt as it should be. There was a comfort in that silence, a kind of understanding that went beyond what we said or didn't say. It was in the way her presence made the cafe feel warmer, brighter, as if the space itself recognized that we were there together, at the same time, every day. The world outside could do what it wanted, rain, snow, sun or wind. It didn't matter. In that little corner of the cafe, time seemed to pause. For those brief moments, we existed in a shared world of quiet, and that was enough. The mornings grew into a gentle routine. I didn't need to say much, and neither did she. We didn't ask about each other's lives, not yet, but there was a mutual respect, a mutual recognition that made everything feel just a little more complete. Each morning, I would walk in, sit by the window, and steal a glance at her. She would catch my eye, and I would see that small smile again, the same one that made my chest feel lighter. It was like we were both saying the same thing without speaking. I see you. I'm here. I'm glad you're here, too. It was strange, really. I hadn't expected any of it. At first, it was just another part of my day. Another quiet moment in my lonely routine. But over time, I began to look forward to those mornings, to seeing her there, to knowing that I wouldn't be sitting in the cafe alone. And it wasn't because I was afraid of being alone. It wasn't even because I was lonely. It was because she was there. It was the fact that we shared that space, that moment, without needing to fill it with anything more than our presence. I started to arrive a little earlier, just to make sure I wouldn't miss her. Not that she was ever late. She always arrived at the same time, and the rhythm of our mornings felt like a quiet dance that had been rehearsed for years. But still I found myself eager to see her, to know that she was still there. There was something reassuring about it, like a little promise, made without words, that no matter what else changed in the world, we would meet in that same spot at that same time and just be. No pressure, no expectations, just two people existing in the same space each day together. Some mornings we'd catch each other's eye a little longer, a moment that lasted just a fraction of a second longer than usual, but it was enough to say everything that needed to be said. We didn't need to speak. The look in her eyes told me that she too had come to find comfort in this shared silence. It wasn't about needing anything. It was about knowing that we weren't alone, even if we didn't speak a word. There was something so quietly beautiful in those moments. No promises made, no plans for the future, just the simple act of being there day after day. I would sit in my seat, watching the world outside pass by, and feel that odd warmth that had settled in my chest. It wasn't the kind of warmth that made me want to leap up and shout to the world. It was the kind that wrapped itself around you, slowly, steadily, until you realized it was the thing that kept you going. The routine, the repetition of those mornings, became something I couldn't do without. It wasn't about the need for company or the desire for conversation. It was the quiet, steady presence of her sitting there across the room, sharing the space with me. In her silence, I found something I hadn't realized I was missing. A kind of peace, a kind of belonging. And as the days turned into weeks, I realized that I had begun to look forward to it more than I cared to admit. It wasn't about what we said or didn't say. It was about knowing that no matter how the rest of my life felt, this part of my day would remain the same. And in a world that seemed to be changing faster than I could keep up with, that small, silent connection was enough to make everything else feel a little more manageable. It was another rainy morning, the kind where the world outside seems to blur into a grey haze, and everything feels softer. I arrived at the café earlier than usual, hoping to find the same peace I'd come to cherish during my quiet mornings. The warmth of the café hit me as soon as I stepped inside, the comforting scent of coffee and baked goods filling the air. I took my usual spot by the window, just as I had every other day. But today was different. Today I wasn't alone. She was there, sitting in her usual seat by the window, her cup of tea resting in front of her. I could tell she had noticed me, but she didn't acknowledge me in any overt way. I didn't expect her to. It wasn't about that. It was the unspoken connection, the silent understanding that we shared this space, this moment, in our own quiet ways. I was about to settle into my chair when I heard it, a voice, soft but clear, breaking the rhythm of my thoughts. "It's colder than usual today." I looked up, startled. For a moment I wasn't sure if she was speaking to me or to herself. But her eyes met mine, and in that brief moment I felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected. Something familiar, but new. She was looking at me, waiting for a response. I swallowed the surprise, not knowing how to react. My mind scrambled for words, but it was as if everything I wanted to say had suddenly escaped me. I wasn't used to starting conversations with strangers, especially not with someone like her, someone who had become a part of my morning routine without me even realizing it. "It sure is," I finally managed to say, my voice sounding a little shaky, even to my own ears. She smiled then, a small, gentle smile that seemed to warm the air around us. "I don't mind the cold, but I wasn't expecting it to hit so early." I nodded, unsure of what else to say. The conversation was so simple, so casual, but in that moment it felt like something more, something unexpected. I realized that I was smiling too, without even meaning to. It was a strange feeling, like something that had been locked away for a long time had suddenly been unlocked. We talked a little longer, about the weather, about the café, about nothing in particular. The words were light, but they filled the space between us in a way that was more meaningful than I could have imagined. I found myself laughing at something she said, and then she laughed too, a soft, pleasant sound that made my chest feel lighter. As I spoke with her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of joy, of relief, bubbling up inside me. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, not since Mary had passed. Talking with this stranger, this woman I had barely known, made me feel like I was actually living again, not just going through the motions of each day. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like I was just waiting for time to pass. After a while, the conversation started to lull, and the café began to fill with the usual morning bustle. She stood up slowly, preparing to leave, and I felt a strange sense of reluctance settle in my chest. The morning had been different, in a way I couldn't explain, and I didn't want it to end. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said, as she gathered her things. It wasn't a question. It was an invitation, one that I knew I wanted to accept, even if I didn't fully understand what it meant. "Yes," I replied, smiling a little more than I had intended. "I'll see you tomorrow." And as she left the café, I sat there for a moment, letting the conversation linger in my mind. I realized something then. It wasn't just the words we shared, it was the feeling, the connection, however small, that had passed between us. That first conversation, so simple and fleeting, had made the world seem a little brighter, a little more alive. I don't know why she spoke to me that day. Maybe she saw something in me, or maybe it was just the weather that made her want to break the silence. But I knew one thing. The silence had broken, and with it, something else had begun, something that felt like the first breath of life after a long sleep. As the weeks passed, something began to shift. The silent exchange of glances, the small nods, the shared spaces, it was no longer enough. Something deeper had started to grow between us, something unspoken but undeniably real. The mornings no longer felt like just a routine. They had become a place where, for a brief moment, we could set aside the weight of the world and simply be together. One morning I sat down as usual, waiting for the soft click of the door and the familiar scent of coffee and tea. But today, as I settled into my chair, she looked up from her book and gave me that small smile, the one I'd come to recognize so well. It wasn't just a greeting anymore, it was an invitation. She gestured toward the chair across from her. "Join me today?" she asked, her voice gentle, almost shy. It wasn't something either of us had done before. Up until now, we had always kept our distance, comfortable in our silent ritual. But today, something was different. I stood up and walked over, sitting down across from her, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through me. There was a kind of nervous excitement in the air, but also an unspoken understanding. We had crossed an invisible line, one that made our mornings feel even more intimate, even more meaningful. We didn't dive into deep conversation right away. Instead, we sat there for a few moments, enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. But eventually, the silence between us became too much to bear, and she spoke first, her voice softer than usual. "You know," she said, her eyes flickering to mine, "I've been coming here for a long time. It's strange. I never thought I'd talk to anyone here, but somehow it feels different with you." I nodded, feeling the same way. It wasn't about the cafe or the tea or the weather. It was about the connection that had slowly grown between us, the shared understanding that we didn't need to fill the space with words to know that we weren't alone. I know what you mean, I replied, my voice low. It's like we don't need to say much, but somehow just being here with you, it makes the days feel less empty. She smiled again, but this time it was tinged with something more vulnerable. I lost my husband a few years ago. After that, it was just me. The house felt so quiet. I didn't even realize how much I missed the sound of someone else's voice until I started coming here. I wasn't sure how to respond at first. Her words, though simple, carried a weight I couldn't ignore. There was so much loss in them, so much longing, and I could feel the same in myself. I had lost Mary many years ago, and though the pain had dulled, the emptiness had never quite gone away. I understand, I said quietly. I lost my wife too. It's funny, isn't it? How you don't realize how much you depend on someone until they're gone. She nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. I never thought I'd be here alone at this age, you know. I thought I'd have more time, more years. But now, it feels like I'm just waiting for something. Waiting for the days to pass. And I'm not sure if that's all I have left, just waiting. Her words struck me deeply, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of understanding in my chest. The years had a way of slipping by unnoticed, didn't they? One day you're full of life and possibilities, and the next you're left wondering where all that time went. I've been feeling the same way, I confessed, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Like I'm just going through the motions, waiting for something to change, but I don't know what that something is. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us caught in the weight of our own thoughts. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, though. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes, a shared recognition that we both understood what it felt like to be alone in the world. And then, as if to break the tension, she did something unexpected. She reached across the table and touched my hand just for a moment. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. It felt like a reassurance, a gentle reminder that we weren't as alone as we sometimes thought we were. I'm glad we're doing this, she said softly. I'm glad we're here, together. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to say that I was glad too, but I didn't want to make it sound too sudden, too desperate. But as I looked at her, sitting there across from me, I realized something. It wasn't about grand declarations or promises. It was about the simple act of being present for each other, of sharing our lives in the small moments, like this one. And so from that day on, we started sitting together, not just silently, but with conversation, sometimes light, sometimes heavy. We shared stories about our children, our lives, the people we had loved and lost. We spoke of the things that kept us awake at night, the fears of growing older, and the loneliness that crept in when the house became too quiet. We began to order for each other, to ask what the other wanted without needing to be told. It wasn't about being polite anymore. It was about caring, about noticing, about saying without words, I see you. And though we hadn't planned it, we had slowly become each other's constant, a source of quiet comfort and unspoken understanding. It wasn't a love that would change the world, but it was something real, something that had grown from the emptiness. It wasn't like when I was younger, when love felt loud and all-consuming, like a flame that could burn brightly and then fade in an instant. This was different. It crept in slowly, like the changing of seasons, subtle and gentle. There was no grand declaration, no words spoken between us, but the feeling was there, unmistakable, settled deep inside. I didn't realize it at first. In the beginning, it was just another part of my routine, just another familiar face in a cafe I had been coming to for years. But as the days passed, I began to notice things. Her smile, the way she looked up from her book when I entered, as if I was the one she'd been waiting for. The warmth of her presence across the table, how it made the space feel less empty, less lonely, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I told myself it was just companionship, just two people finding solace in each other's company. And maybe it was in the beginning. But somewhere along the way, something changed. I don't know exactly when it happened. It wasn't a moment of realization like you see in the movies. It wasn't fireworks or grand gestures. It was more like a quiet shift, a soft murmur in my chest that I couldn't ignore. I'd catch myself looking forward to our mornings together, even though we hadn't said anything more than a few words at a time. And when she wasn't there, when the chair across from me remained empty, there was this strange, hollow feeling inside me, a space that I didn't know had been filled until it was gone. I'd arrive a little earlier, just to make sure I wouldn't miss her. And when I didn't see her, I'd feel a knot of worry in my stomach, an unease I couldn't shake. It wasn't just the routine I was missing. It was her. It was the quiet comfort of knowing she would be there, just as she always had been. Her absence left a void that was impossible to ignore. I started to realize that I needed her presence more than I had allowed myself to admit. It wasn't about needing someone to fill the silence. It was about needing her specific kind of quiet, her gentle way of existing in the world. When she wasn't there, the cafe felt different, colder, emptier. And when she did show up, I could feel my chest lighten, like a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted, if only for a few moments. It wasn't love in the way I had known it when I was younger, with all the passion and chaos. It was quieter, steadier. It wasn't the kind of love that made you shout to the world how you felt. It was the kind that settled in your bones and made you feel at home in your own skin again. It was the kind that made you look forward to the little things, like the sound of the door opening or the way her fingers curled around her cup of tea. One morning, as I sat there waiting for her to arrive, I realized just how much I had come to depend on our mornings together, and I couldn't quite put it into words, not yet. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. There was something perfect about the way it was, unspoken, untamed, a love that didn't need to be defined by labels or declarations. It was enough that we had this quiet understanding between us, this shared space that had become more than just a routine. I didn't need to hear her say it. I didn't need her to tell me she felt the same way. I could feel it in the way she smiled when she saw me, in the way we would sit together without saying much at all. But somehow everything felt said. I felt it in the small things, the way she would let me order for her, or how she would ask if I wanted anything without needing to be reminded. It wasn't love like when I was 20. It was deeper. It was quieter. But it was real. And I could feel it, even in the silence. And maybe, in a way, that was all we needed. No words, no promises, just the understanding that we were there for each other in the simplest and most profound way possible. It started like any other morning. I woke up, made my coffee and prepared for another quiet day at the cafe. I was looking forward to seeing her across the table, a small part of my routine that had become so important to me without even realizing it. But as I walked through the door, the usual warmth of the café felt different. The chair across from me, where she always sat, was empty. For a moment I thought maybe she was running late. It wasn't unusual. We both had our mornings when time seemed to slip through our fingers, but she'd always show up, as reliable as the sunrise. I took my usual seat, settled in with my coffee, and tried not to think too much about it. But when the minutes stretched into an hour, a quiet unease began to settle in my chest. Where was she? Had something happened? I tried to push the thought away, but it clung to me like a shadow. The second day passed and she didn't show up. By then my heart was beginning to ache. I told myself it was nothing, just a brief absence, a small blip in the rhythm of our mornings. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I couldn't remember a time when I had hoped for someone's presence so desperately, and yet here I was, waiting, wondering. I went ahead and ordered an extra tea just in case. I placed it carefully on the table, the same way I had seen her do it countless times. It felt like the right thing to do, even though there was no one there to receive it. The silence in the cafe that morning was suffocating. The usual hum of voices, the clinking of cups and saucers, seemed to grow louder, more oppressive. I didn't realize how loud an empty seat could be until that moment. It was as if the world had gone silent, holding its breath, waiting for something I couldn't name. On the third day, I found myself pacing the cafe like a man waiting for news, although there was no news to be had. I had no idea where she was, why she hadn't shown up. The small flicker of worry turned into something much deeper, a gnawing feeling of loss. How could I miss someone so much when I had hardly spoken to her? How could a simple presence leave such a void in my life? I started thinking about the mornings we had shared, the way her smile had brightened the dull routine of my days, the way we would exchange glances without needing words, and how that silence had become a kind of comfort to me. Now that silence felt unbearable. It felt like a betrayal, as though the routine I had come to rely on had been ripped away without warning. I tried to distract myself, but nothing worked. The cafe felt empty without her, even though it was filled with people. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I stared at the door, hoping to see her walk through it, but each time my heart sank a little more when it didn't happen. "I just don't understand," I muttered to myself as I sat back down at our table, the empty chair mocking me with its vacancy. Where was she? Why had she disappeared without a word? For the first time in a long while, I felt truly lost. Not just in the sense of missing her presence, but in the deeper sense of not knowing what to do with this sudden, unexpected emptiness. I'd been so sure that we had found something real, something quiet and steady, something worth holding on to. But now it felt like I was grasping at air, reaching for something that wasn't there anymore. I didn't know how to explain it, how to make sense of the hole she had left in my life, because I had never expected to feel this way. I had never expected to care so much about someone who, until recently, had been nothing more than a stranger in a cafe. But in the span of a few short weeks, she had become more than that. She had become a part of my days, a small but crucial piece of my routine, and now, without her, everything felt incomplete. I sat there for hours, waiting, hoping, and yet knowing deep down that she wouldn't walk through the door. The empty seat remained just as it had been for the past few days, and the weight of that emptiness pressed down on me, heavy and unrelenting. I had no idea if I would ever see her again. And in that moment, I didn't know what was worse: the fact that she was gone, or the fact that I had no way of knowing why. All I knew was that something had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. It had been almost a week. Each day I returned to the café, the empty chair across from me weighing heavier with each passing moment. I tried not to let my mind wander to the worst possible scenarios, but it was hard. I had come to expect her, there like a quiet anchor in my day, and now everything felt unmoored. I was sitting at the table, lost in thought, when the café attendant approached. She hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether or not to interrupt. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft. "This was left for you." I blinked, confused. She handed me an envelope, simple and unadorned, with my name written neatly in a familiar hand. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the handwriting, her handwriting. I opened the envelope slowly, my fingers trembling slightly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and as I read the words, my chest tightened with emotion. The letter read, "Dear friend, in case I don't come back, I wanted to take a moment to thank you. These last few months, seeing you across the table, every morning have meant more to me than I could ever put into words. You made these last few months feel like spring again, warm, full of light, and full of quiet understanding. I never expected to find someone like you at this stage of my life, but you have reminded me that it's never too late to find comfort, even in the smallest of connections. For that, I am grateful. If you ever feel lonely again, remember that you were a part of my days, and you made them brighter. Please take care of yourself. With gratitude, Margaret." My hands shook as I folded the letter. I read it over and over, each time feeling the weight of her words sink deeper into me. She had known. She had known all along what I couldn't admit to myself, that what we shared, even without saying it, had meant something profound. She wasn't just a woman I had shared a few quiet mornings with. She had become a part of my life in a way that I had never expected, and now she was gone, leaving behind only a letter, a final act of kindness that filled me with a bitter-sweet warmth. In that moment, I realized that even in the silence, even in her absence, she had given me something precious, a new beginning, the hope that perhaps connections like ours could still happen, even when you least expect them. And with that, I let the weight of my grief lift just a little, because, as she had written, it was never too late. I still come to the café every morning like I always did. The same routine, the same seat by the window, the same quiet hum of the world outside, but now it's a little different. The empty chair across from me no longer feels as heavy as it did that first day she was gone. It still feels empty, of course, but the silence isn't so oppressive anymore. I order 2 cups of tea as I always did, one for me and one for her. I don't think I'll ever stop doing that. It's a small thing, but it feels right. It's my way of holding on, a way of keeping a part of her close, even though she's not physically here anymore. Some mornings, I still catch myself looking up, hoping to see her walk through the door, hoping to see that familiar smile that always seemed to make the whole world feel a little softer. And when I don't see her, I remind myself, she's gone, but she's never really gone. Sometimes I imagine she's still there, sitting across from me, her eyes twinkling with that quiet, knowing smile. And maybe, just maybe, she is. I like to believe she's still here in the little things, the way the light hits the table just right, or the sound of the door opening with that familiar chime. I like to think that wherever she is, she's watching over me, sending me little signs reminding me that it's okay to keep going. I don't feel the same ache in my chest anymore. Time has passed, and the pain has softened, but the warmth she left behind lingers like the last sip of a good cup of tea. I find peace in the small rituals, in the quiet moments that remind me of her. And in a way, those mornings at the café are still just as much for her as they are for me. I come every day because love doesn't have to be loud to be real. It doesn't have to shout or make grand gestures. Sometimes love is quiet. It's the little things. And sometimes love is just the knowing that someone was there and that they'll always have a place in your heart, even when they're no longer sitting across from you at the table. And so I'll continue to come, for as long as I can, to honor what we had, to keep the memory of her alive in my own small way. And maybe, just maybe, she's still here, smiling at me from across the room in the silence between us. This story is a reminder that love can be found in the most unexpected places and at the most unexpected times. It's not always loud or grand. Sometimes it's quiet, simple, and peaceful. Love doesn't have to be tied to age or circumstance. It's about the small moments, the unspoken connections, and the ways someone can touch your life in a way you never saw coming. Even in loss, there's room for hope and new beginnings. Have you ever experienced a quiet connection that made a difference in your life? Can love, no matter how small, still make an impact at any stage of life? How do you hold on to the memories of someone who is no longer with you? If this story resonated with you, we'd love for you to be a part of our community. Hit the subscribe button to stay connected with more touching stories of love, connection, and the beautiful moments that shape our lives. Let's share these stories together, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find something that makes your heart feel a little warmer today.